In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about security issues with Ruby on Rails. Now, since Ruby on Rails is a web application, and for the most part, unless it's behind a firewall or on a private network, you're going to have it exposed to the internet, so it's going to be exposed to all of the attacks that are out there. Like most web-based applications, it is particularly vulnerable to a couple of specific types of attacks, and in later videos we'll talk about two of those attacks in detail, the SQL injection attack and the CSS attack, cross-scripting attack. A little bit in general about Ruby on Rails security. First off, in order to implement some type of security, it's best to be using before filters, and if you're going to have people logging in. And you put those before filters, as we explained in the videos talking about filters, in your controllers that you want to have checked. And before any action will run in this controller, this filter is going to run. And it's going to run the method checkLogin. And our checkLogin method says unless session critic, which means unless has a value, if it's nil, this is going to run. If this is not nil, it'll just continue on. It'll come back with true, and whatever action was called will be allowed to run. So in this case, if we log in, let's go ahead and I have this running. Let me switch over to my browser. Go ahead and here and log in. And it allows us to run that action and goes to our index page, which is just set up as a very simple, just says critic home. Certainly we could have other actions in there. If I try to get to that action without logging in, so let me log out here, and I'll explain what that logout button did in a second. Let me put index. Because I have that before action, you see it just knocked me right back over to my login page. Now let me try some nonsense in here and you'll see what it's going to do. It's just going to say incorrect email address and password combination. Now, there's two things going on here that's not so good from a security standpoint. First off, you'll notice this is HTTP. So if someone has managed to sniff this traffic, they will see this password come over unencrypted text. When you type this is just hiding it from the browser. It's in that parameter list. So if we look at inside of our code here, the params, and we look at where that password's coming in here, this cannot be hidden or anything from our application. Now there is a way around this, and that's to use a method where you store a hashed version of the password using a standard hash, or a salt as it's called, and when someone types in a password, you run that salt against that password and compare that to the hash that's stored in your database. So unless someone has direct access to what that hash is, that having that password is not going to help them really in any extent. The other thing that's occurring here is because this is HTTP, if we did HTTPS, this would be encrypted. This would be a little bit safer to have a clear text password, but it's certainly not as safe as having something where your password is stored in a secret manner. The other issue that you need to be looking out for is when you have fields like this is what makes us vulnerable to those other attacks, the SQL injection attack specifically, is if you do a find here, and we'll talk about this, but if you use these parameters and try to use them directly, it really exposes your application to some nefarious activities. And in the next video, we'll talk about the SQL injection attack and see how that works.